react to every little thing, something powerful begins to happen. It's not just about pulling away physically, it's about what you stop doing emotionally and mentally. Silence speaks volumes, and in this space you give him room to think, reflect, and feel. When you stop chasing, you create a sense of mystery. You're no longer a constant in his life, and that absence, that quiet, is louder than anything you could say. At first, it may feel uncomfortable, even unnatural. You're used to being present, used to showing up, but there's power in stepping back, and the moment you do that, he starts noticing. He's no longer getting the constant reassurance, the validation that you care, that you're always there. He begins to feel the loss, even if he doesn't admit it. It's like a mirror you've been holding up for him. The more you react, the more you chase, the more you allow him to take you for granted. But the moment you stop reacting, stop explaining why things are the way they are, you make him reflect. The things he once ignored start to matter. Your silence forces him to sit with his own thoughts, without the distractions of your emotions. It brings a clarity that can't be ignored. He might not show it on the surface, but trust me, he's paying attention. Every word you don't say, every move you don't make is a signal. And in that silence, he's left with his thoughts. And it's in those moments of solitude that the truth begins to settle in. He realizes, perhaps for the first time, that your presence wasn't something he could take for granted. It's powerful because it shifts the dynamic. The chase is no longer yours. The moment you stop, you force him to reconsider his actions, his approach. He begins to question himself, the relationship, and what he's missing. And that's when the change happens. He starts watching you more closely than you think. Sometimes we believe we need to keep giving, keep showing up, and keep pushing. But real change happens when you stop doing all that. When you let go and focus on you, that's when you force him to look at the bigger picture, your worth, your strength, and what he's losing. And you'll find that the more you let go, the more he's drawn to you. Every little change you make, whether it's in the way you carry yourself or the energy you bring into a room, doesn't go unnoticed. The growth you experience in your life, the quiet shifts that no one may even see, are the things that captivate his attention. The moment you start prioritizing yourself, focusing on your own dreams, your happiness, and your peace, that's when you start making the biggest impact. And let me tell you, that's when he begins to take notice in ways you can't even imagine. When you start standing firm in your boundaries, when you start saying no to things that no longer serve you, when you begin to say yes to your own self-worth, he starts watching closely. It's not just about what you do, it's about how you do it. The confidence you build, the strength you develop, it shows. And when that happens, you become a mystery to him. You're no longer the same person he thought he knew. You're evolving, and that evolution is powerful. What he doesn't understand is that this growth isn't about him, it's about you. But to him, that change is something he can't ignore. When you shift your focus from him to yourself, when you take time to nurture your own mind, body, and soul, he starts to feel the difference. At first, he might think it's a phase or just something temporary, but the longer it continues, the more he begins to wonder, what happened to her? There's something magnetic about a woman who has her own life, who knows her value and doesn't need to seek validation from anyone. It's not arrogance, it's self-love. And that's what makes you stand out. You're no longer chasing him for attention. Instead, you're living your life with a quiet confidence that speaks volumes. And the moment you realize this, you stop doubting your own worth, you stop waiting for his approval, and that's when the real transformation begins. He starts comparing you to the person you used to be. He looks at the way you used to beg for his time, for his energy, for his love, but now he sees a different woman, a woman who is focused on her own life, who is in control of her emotions, who is thriving, and that's when it hits him. What changed? It makes him question everything he thought he knew. He can't help but watch you from afar, trying to piece together the woman standing before him now. That growth, that change in energy, that shift in your focus, it makes him stop in his tracks. He may not admit it, but he's wondering if he missed something. He's wondering if he overlooked the strength that was always there, and now it's undeniable. And here's the truth. This is when you have the power. This is when you've taken the control back. You've shifted the narrative from being someone who needed validation to someone who has their own strength and presence. And once you reach this place, he can't help but notice the woman who's no longer waiting for him to validate her existence. So keep growing. Keep focusing on your own journey, because the moment you do, he'll be watching you more closely than you ever thought possible. And that's the moment when you hold the cards. When you stop over-explaining yourself, you stop giving him access to your vulnerability in a way that diminishes your power. For so long, many of us believe that by explaining ourselves, by offering justifications and reasons for our actions or feelings, we can make someone understand us better, make them see our side of the story. But here's the truth. Over-explaining only weakens your position. It lowers your value because it shows that you're seeking approval, that you feel the need to convince someone of your worth. And when you do that, you're giving away a piece of your power. The more you explain yourself, the less room there is for mystery, for curiosity. You're not leaving anything for him to figure out. You're handing him every piece of information, every thought, every feeling. And while that might seem like honesty or transparency, it doesn't allow space for him to truly appreciate the depth of who you are. He might even take your vulnerability for granted, thinking he already understands everything there is to know about you. But when you stop over-explaining, you leave room for him to wonder, for him to question, for him to see things he didn't notice before. It's like pulling back the curtain just enough for him to catch a glimpse of something, but not enough for him to see the entire picture. It ignites curiosity and makes him think. The more you explain, the less he has to figure out. And when you stop doing that, when you let your actions speak louder than your words, when you stop trying to prove yourself, you create a space where he's forced to pay attention. He starts to wonder why you're no longer chasing, why you're no longer explaining yourself. You have to understand that your worth doesn't need to be explained. You don't have to justify your boundaries, your feelings, or your choices. The moment you stop explaining, you send a message. I don't need to prove anything to you. And that is power. It shifts the energy between you. Instead of him feeling like he has the upper hand or the full understanding of who you are, he's left in the dark, wanting to learn more, wanting to see more. It's that distance, that space that allows him to reflect on his own actions and his own behavior. When you stop explaining, you're also showing that you're no longer desperate for validation or understanding. You're simply living your life. This doesn't mean you become cold or indifferent. It means you stand in your truth, unshaken and grounded, without needing anyone's approval to validate it. You give him space to see you, to process you, and to come to his own conclusions. The more you over-explain, the more you blur the lines, and he never has to take a deeper look. But when you stop, that's when he's forced to look closer. And here's the beauty of it. The more you stop explaining, the more you start living for yourself. You begin to realize that you don't need to answer to anyone but yourself. You stop caring so much about whether he agrees with you, whether he understands you, or whether he's pleased with your actions. You become a woman of substance and strength who stands tall in her choices, and that's when the real shift happens. That's when he starts paying attention to you in ways that he never did before. So let go of the need to explain every part of your life, every decision, every feeling, because when you stop over-explaining yourself, you allow the space for him to truly question everything he thought he knew about you, and that's when the power shifts. You might think that by letting him see how much you're hurting, you're letting him in, but in reality, you're doing the opposite. When you allow him to see that you're broken, desperate, or struggling, you might think it will invite sympathy, compassion, or understanding, but more often than not, it does the opposite. It makes you seem weaker, less in control, and it signals that you're not really in charge of your own life. And that right there is a dangerous place to be. You're no longer seen as someone strong, someone with their own life, but as someone who's emotionally reliant and waiting for someone else to pick up the pieces. Now, I know that sounds harsh, but let's be real for a moment. Vulnerability is powerful when it's used in the right way. But vulnerability for the sake of seeking sympathy is disempowering. When you allow him to see that you're falling apart, that's the story he starts to tell himself. He might not say it out loud, but in his mind, you become the person he needs to rescue or the person he has to constantly manage. You lose your independence and he gains control. Instead of showing that you're struggling or waiting for him to save you, show him that you can handle your own life, that you are more than capable of facing your challenges head on. Don't give him the narrative that you're incomplete without him. Let him see that your life is full and rich, that you're independent, and that you don't need him to be okay. This is what builds respect, not only from him, but from yourself. When you own your emotions and your struggles, without laying them out on display for anyone to rescue you, you're stepping into your power. Think about it for a second. When you show a man that you can handle your own pain, your own struggles, your own life, without leaning on him, begging for attention, or looking for a savior, you become irresistible. Why? Because you're a force. You're someone who knows their worth, and you don't need anyone to validate it. You're emotionally strong, emotionally independent. You create the kind of space where he has to ask himself, why isn't she running after me? Why isn't she depending on me to fix things for her? You see, when you stop giving him that front row seat to your vulnerability, it forces him to come to you to want to know what's really going on, to question how you're doing, and to recognize that you're a woman with depth. You are not someone who crumbles at the first sign of discomfort. You're someone who can weather any storm on her own and still stand tall. That's what makes you valuable. And the minute you stop seeking pity or sympathy from him is the minute you start to gain your true power back. It's not about pretending you're fine when you're not. It's about showing up with strength and resilience, even in your most challenging moments. You don't need to wear your pain on your sleeve or let him see how much it affects you. Keep a sense of mystery and strength, even when things are hard. People, especially men, are drawn to strength because it shows resilience, and resilience is something that builds trust and admiration over time. And here's the thing, when you stop seeking validation from him, you show him that you're not just an emotional roller coaster. You're a woman who can handle herself, who knows what she wants, and who is emotionally balanced. This kind of confidence, this kind of emotional independence is what makes him stop and think. It's what causes him to question everything he thought he knew about you, to realize that he can't easily define or categorize you, and to see you as someone with true value. So, keep your emotional struggles private. Let them be your own journey to walk through. If you need to cry, do it in private. If you need to feel your pain, do it without needing someone else to witness it. Because when you let him see that you can weather storms alone, when you stop showing him that you're dependent on his emotional validation, that's when he begins to question everything. That's when he starts to realize that you're a woman who doesn't need fixing. Only someone who appreciates the full, complex, strong, and independent person you are. And that's when the shift in power truly begins. You may think that by giving him all your attention, you're proving to him that you care, that you're invested, and that he's important to you. But here's the truth. It's easy for a man to take your attention for granted when you give it to him freely and without reserve. If you're constantly available, constantly present, without creating any space for yourself, what you're really doing is teaching him that he can have you whenever he wants. And while that might feel comforting in the moment, the reality is that it doesn't create the kind of respect and intrigue you want. When you give him your attention too freely, you stop being a challenge. You stop being someone he has to work for. Men, whether we like to admit it or not, are drawn to challenge. It's not about playing games. It's about understanding the value of space and mystery. When he knows you're always there, it takes away the desire to chase after you, to earn your attention, and to prove himself worthy of it. Now, this doesn't mean you should shut him out completely or be cold and distant. It simply means that you need to balance your presence. A little bit of distance creates curiosity. When he doesn't know exactly what you're doing or what's going on in your world, he starts to wonder. He starts to question. When you're not always there to pick up the phone immediately or be at his beck and call, he begins to see you in a different light. You become someone who has a life of her own, someone who doesn't just revolve around him and his needs. This is an incredibly powerful shift. When you become a little more elusive, not in a manipulative way, but in a way that allows him to see that you're independent and busy, he starts to question his role in your life. He starts to ask himself, why isn't she always available? Why am I not getting the attention I used to? And that's when you shift the power dynamic. You also create the opportunity for him to start missing you. When you're always there, he's not given the chance to miss your presence. When you pull back, even just a little bit, you allow him to start appreciating your time, your energy, and your company in a way he might not have before. It's not about being difficult. It's about having enough respect for yourself and your time that you don't give it away freely. Your presence becomes something he has to earn, something he has to desire. You have to create that sense of mystery, a sense of individuality. Your life, your passions, and your purpose must come first. When you put your energy into building your own world, your own dreams, your own sense of fulfillment, it becomes apparent to him that you don't need him to complete you. You are already whole. You're someone who has her own goals, her own ambitions, and her own life. And that is attractive. When you prioritize yourself, you shift the focus away from being dependent on his validation or presence to being someone who is fully engaged in her own journey. And that, my friend, is a powerful thing. When you're focused on your own growth and happiness, he starts to realize that you're not just another woman who can be taken for granted. You become someone he has to fight for, someone he has to prove himself worthy of. It's not about playing games, it's about valuing your own time, your own worth, and your own independence. When you give him too much of yourself too soon, it's like giving him the entire book before he's even earned the right to read it. Create intrigue, create space, and watch how he begins to chase after you. Because when he sees you living your life, accomplishing your goals, and maintaining your own happiness without needing him to validate it, he won't be able to help but question everything. In the end, when you give yourself the gift of space, when you stop overextending yourself, that's when the power shifts. You stop being just another option and start being a woman of value. And that is the moment when you can begin to see him shift, not just in his actions, but in the way he begins to view you, someone who is strong, independent, and deserving of respect. And that's when he starts to question everything he thought he knew about you. It's easy to assume that by always being open and available, we can prove how much we care, how much we love, and how deeply we want to connect. But here's something many women don't realize. Constant availability can diminish your value. When you give yourself to someone without boundaries or without creating moments of space, you inadvertently make yourself less of a challenge, less of a mystery, and less intriguing. Men are naturally drawn to what is scarce or hard to get. It's a part of the dynamic between attraction and desire. Think about it. When something is always within reach, it can often be taken for granted. If you're constantly answering his texts within seconds, constantly making yourself available at his convenience, you might be unknowingly diminishing the excitement that should exist between the two of you. In relationships, and even in the early stages of dating, it's essential to create moments of space, to create distance. This doesn't mean playing games or being manipulative. It means having your own life, your own priorities, and your own boundaries. It's about maintaining your independence and not getting so absorbed in him that you forget who you are as an individual. It's important to value yourself enough to step back, give him room to wonder, and not be the one to constantly initiate or constantly give. When you give someone too much of your attention and time without giving him the opportunity to work for it, you rob him of the chance to miss you. Think about it. If you're always available, if your life revolves around his, there's no need for him to chase, to desire to put in effort. The excitement, the spark, the mystery, those things come when you pull back just a little and allow him to realize your value. By taking a step back and allowing space in your interactions, you're not being cold or distant. You're showing him that you have a life outside of him, that you have goals, passions, and a world that doesn't solely revolve around his needs. The more you prioritize your own life, the more you become someone who's not just easily accessible, but someone whose presence is something to be earned, something that he has to work for. Men respect and value women who are secure in themselves, who don't need to rely on constant validation. And by giving him the space to miss you, to wonder where you are, and to question your availability, you create a sense of desire that draws him in. It's not about pretending to be busy or playing hard to get, but about showing him that you have boundaries, that you value your own time, and that you expect him to show the same level of interest and effort that you're putting in. The key here is creating that sense of mystery. When he knows he can't have all of your attention all the time, it makes him appreciate you more. It makes him question what's going on in your life. It makes him curious about you. And that's when he begins to realize just how much you bring to the table. The less available you are, the more valuable your presence becomes, and the more he starts to see your worth. And this is where the shift happens. You stop being someone he can take for granted, and you start being someone he has to work for. Your value increases not because of what you do, but because of the way you manage your time, your boundaries, and your own world. You become someone who commands respect, someone whose attention is not easily won, and someone who is truly worth chasing. In the end, by stepping back and giving him the space to chase, to desire, and to miss you, you put the power back in your hands. You shift the dynamic of the relationship from one-sided to mutual, and you start to create a deeper connection based on respect, effort, and a shared desire. And that's when you realize that by simply valuing yourself and maintaining your boundaries, you've created a foundation for a stronger, more meaningful relationship. It's easy to get caught up in the idea that the more you give, the more you'll receive. But in reality, relationships aren't about constant giving. They're about balance. And when you overextend yourself, when you give more than you receive, you end up draining yourself and losing sight of what truly matters. It's not just about the amount of love or attention you offer. It's about the energy you invest in something that reciprocates your efforts. Often, women find themselves in relationships where they're constantly giving, whether it's emotionally, physically, or mentally. But the truth is, giving too much without receiving anything in return only leads to feelings of frustration and disappointment. You give and give, expecting that love and attention to come back in the same way, but when it doesn't, the resentment begins to grow. And that's when you start feeling drained, unappreciated, and confused about why things don't feel balanced. One of the most important things you can do in any relationship is to ask yourself, are my efforts being reciprocated? Am I receiving the same level of care and energy that I'm giving? If the answer is no, it's time to step back and reassess the situation. It's not selfish to want to be treated with the same respect and effort you give. In fact, it's necessary. Relationships thrive on balance, not on one person constantly giving while the other takes. If you're the one always showing up, always putting in the effort, always making the first move, then you're setting a dangerous precedent. You're telling the other person that it's okay to take and not give back. And this dynamic can lead to emotional exhaustion. But when you make it clear through your actions that your time and energy are valuable and that you won't continue to invest in something that isn't returning that investment, you shift the dynamic entirely. It's not about being cold or distant. It's about setting healthy boundaries. It's about showing that your time, your love, and your energy have worth, and that they should be treated with the same respect you give. When you stop overextending, you create a space for the other person to show up, to give, and to meet you where you're at. If they truly care, they will recognize the imbalance and make the necessary changes to restore harmony. But if they don't take the hint, if they continue to take without giving, then you have your answer. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to stop giving so much. It's about recognizing your own worth and understanding that your time and your emotional energy are precious. And once you begin to prioritize yourself, once you stop overextending, you'll see who truly values you and who only wants to take. In the end, relationships are a two-way street. If you find yourself giving without receiving, it's time to take a step back and evaluate if this is a relationship that's worth your energy. By not overextending yourself, you ensure that your love, care, and energy are being met with the same level of respect. And that's when you'll find that balance that makes a relationship truly thrive. It's so easy to think that we can read people, especially when we know them well. We believe that we have them all figured out, that we understand their actions, their words, and their motives. But the truth is, sometimes people don't say everything they mean, and their actions don't always match what they're feeling inside. Often, what they say and do is just a small part of a much bigger picture, and that's something we must keep in mind. In relationships, we tend to focus on the surface, on the words that are spoken and the actions that are visible. But the deeper truth often lies beneath those words and actions. We must ask ourselves, what is the real message they're trying to send? People, especially men, might not always express their emotions in ways we expect. Sometimes they don't verbalize what's on their minds, and other times their actions might contradict what they say. This is where it gets tricky. The subtle things, the small changes in behavior, the way they act when you're not looking, the things they don't say, are often more telling than the things they do openly. Men, for instance, might not always tell you exactly what's going on in their minds, but their actions, their body language, and their small gestures might speak louder than words. It's easy to miss these signs because we're too focused on the direct communication. But the truth is, sometimes people are revealing more through their silence and their unspoken actions than through anything they directly say. It's essential to learn how to read between the lines, understanding someone's behavior, how they respond to you when they think you're not watching. The little things they do when they think you don't notice can reveal much more than a conversation could. These actions can show how much they value you, how deeply they care, or even if they're starting to pull away. People often communicate in subtle ways that, when you're not paying attention, can go unnoticed. But the more attuned you become to these subtle shifts, the more you'll understand what's really going on. And this isn't just about men, this applies to all relationships. We all have our ways of hiding what's truly going on inside, whether we're trying to protect ourselves or avoid conflict. But when you start paying attention to the unspoken parts, the glances, the pauses, the unspoken gestures, you'll begin to see the truth in a way you never did before. The problem is, many of us are too caught up in the obvious, the words that are spoken, to notice what's happening under the surface. To truly understand someone, we must look beyond the words and start paying attention to the things they aren't saying. It's about noticing the silence and understanding that sometimes that's where the real conversation is happening. By becoming aware of these silent cues, you'll start to see who's truly invested, who's truly paying attention, and who's trying to hide the truth. It's not always about what's said, it's about what's left unsaid. So remember, he's watching you more closely than you think, and in many cases, he's also revealing more than you realize through his silence and his actions. Understanding this and learning to read between the lines is the key to truly knowing what's going on. Pay attention to the unspoken. It can reveal more than you ever expected. Sometimes we get so caught up in the actions that we forget about the impact of our own behaviors. When someone is watching you more closely than you think, it's not just about how they see you, it's about how they react to what you do. Every small gesture, every slight change in your demeanor is a signal. Whether you realize it or not, you are sending messages all the time. And believe me, they're paying attention to them more than you might imagine. We often focus on the big things, the conversations, the dramatic moments, the pivotal decisions. But the little things often say so much more. The way you carry yourself, how you respond in everyday situations, or even how you hold yourself in moments of vulnerability can say more than any words can. It's these small, subtle things that shape the image others have of you, especially when they're watching from a distance or when they think you're not looking. Men in particular are keen observers of body language, the unspoken, the things that don't need to be said. It's not just the words or the actions, but the energy you bring with you in every room you enter. If you seem at ease, confident, or carefree, that signals something different than if you're anxious, withdrawn, or insecure. They're not just watching what you say, they're watching how you move through life and how you react to the world around you. And this goes both ways. When you're being watched more closely than you think, you start to realize that your actions are shaping others' perceptions of you. You start to become more aware of how you present yourself, how you hold your own, and how you choose to act in moments of difficulty or challenge. The way you respond to stress, to conflict, to success, these are all things they notice. And if you can remain calm, composed, and confident even when things aren't perfect, you'll show strength and resilience in a way that speaks volumes. It's also about consistency. When you behave consistently with your values, beliefs, and actions, others begin to trust and respect you even more. When you let your actions match your words, when you walk with integrity and confidence, people begin to see you for who you truly are. But when you're inconsistent, when your words don't align with your actions, people start questioning you, even more so if they are observing you from a distance. So remember, your presence, your actions, your energy, it's all being watched. And those little things that you might not even notice are shaping someone's perception of you. What you do when no one is looking, what you say when you think no one is listening, those moments count. It's not just the big gestures, it's the quiet, everyday things that tell the real story. And once you understand that, you'll begin to realize just how much power you have over how others see you. The truth is, when someone is watching you more closely than you think, it's not just about observation, it's about what they're learning from your behavior. In those moments when you think you're alone, when you feel like nobody is paying attention, it's in those moments that your actions speak the loudest. It's in the small decisions you make, the way you carry yourself, the way you treat others, that others are forming their opinions about you. And here's the thing, those who are watching you are looking for consistency. They want to know if the person you present in public is the same person you are in private. They're not just paying attention to what you say, they're looking at how you behave when there are no eyes on you, when there's no one to impress, when there's no spotlight shining on you. It's in these moments that your true character shines through. When someone is paying attention to you, they're also paying attention to your energy. Your confidence or lack of it speaks volumes. How you handle challenges, how you deal with success, how you manage relationships, and even how you react to adversity, it all tells a story. The way you show up in the world, the way you navigate life's ups and downs, reveals a lot about your inner strength, or lack thereof, and they're noticing every detail. People are more intuitive than we often give them credit for. They sense when something's off, they feel when something is genuine, and they notice when someone is trying too hard. You might not even realize it, but how you handle life in general is being analyzed. From the way you walk into a room, to how you handle difficult situations, to how you maintain your composure under pressure, it's all part of the silent conversation that others are having about you. Ultimately, knowing that someone is watching you closely should push you to elevate your standards, not for them, but for you, to show up as your best self, to act with integrity, to be true to your values, and to walk in a way that shows who you really are. So the next time you think no one is paying attention, remember that every action, every small move, and every decision you make is leaving an impression. And it's shaping how the world sees you. You have the power to change the narrative. So start showing up as the person you want others to see, not just for the outside world, but for yourself. Let every step you take be a reflection of the greatness within you.